Malcolm Jenkins, good to see you, sir.
Always good to see you.
You bet. And so the fact that you are here allows you to rearrange my set dressing.
Yeah.
If you will. I always have, there's just one item on my desk that has nothing to do with the actual preparation or execution of the show, and it's my mini Michigan helmet that's to my left. You have now placed a mini Ohio State helmet in your corner of the desk.
Balance it out, yeah.
You got to balance it out.
I mean, yeah, because, not everybody else can see. You got Michigan paraphernalia everywhere.
That's true.
And I felt it was very uncomfortable.
I would call it gear instead of paraphernalia. I would call it.
So I was in the dressing room, and there's like this bowl that has keys and wallets and like paper clips and dirty change. It looks like people just discard things into it. Is that supposed to be the big house?
It is, in fact, the big house. Yes, it is.
A bowl where things get discarded. I like it.
I haven't really thought of it that way. How does a kid from Jersey wind up at The Ohio State University, Malcolm Jenkins?
So, grew up in Piscataway, New Jersey. My aunt moved to Westerville, Ohio, maybe my sophomore year in high school. And so one summer we decided to go visit. So we were there for 2 weeks. And my parents paid for myself, my brother, and a friend of mine to go to Ohio State's 4-day camp. Mm-hmm. I didn't know that, like, if you're a recruit, that you don't have to pay to go to these camps, but we paid. Mm-hmm. And there were like wide receiver DB one-on-one drills. And I started kind of in the line that had like the least amount of competition. So I kind of dominated there. So I went to the next line, and then eventually I just made myself down to where I saw all the coaches paying attention with all of the best receivers. So all of their top recruits, like Brian Hartline was there, Brian Bobisky, all these guys. And I just like kept competing. And anytime a defensive back a corner would hesitate to go out or they were nervous, I just jump out in front of them. And so I would do 2, 3, 4 reps in a row. Mel Tucker was the DB coach at the time, or he might have been a D coordinator. And he pulled me to the side and he said, he's like, what's your name? I said, Malcolm Jenkins. He said, you might be the best corner in the country. And I was a 1-star recruit at the time. And so we went in the back and we watched some of my tape. And by the time I got back to Jersey, I had an offer from Ohio State.
No kidding.
Yep.
So who else offered you?
So at that point in time, I only had an offer from Rutgers because I literally played in their backyard.
That's a backyard, yeah.
Yeah, and then Ohio State was the second one. And I think just because Ohio State offered me, I got an offer from VTech and Syracuse and Indiana.
So the fact that Ohio State was first, you felt comfortable having been at that camp. Your aunt was living in Ohio. That was the end of that. That just put
it came down to 3 schools: VTech, Rutgers, and Ohio State. I went to visit Virginia Tech, which was my grandmother lived maybe 2 hours from there.
So was Beamer there at the time?
Yes.
Frank Beamer? Okay.
And before I got into the meeting with Beamer, the DB coach at the time, as we're walking down the hall, he's like, "Okay, now we've offered 6 corners. We're going to take the first 2 that commit. So make sure you go in there and give coach a good impression." And so that kind of rubbed me the wrong way because I was like, "You really don't want me. You just want 2 corners." So I took them off the list, and then it came down to Rutgers and Ohio State. Shiano had just got to Rutgers. And the only reason I didn't go there was because I didn't like that Shiano only recruited his skill positions from Florida at that time. He was just coming from Miami. And so he had this whole stigma that, all the skill position, the best guys were in Florida. And so he skipped over a ton of guys that were in Jersey at the time. And so I ended up at Ohio State.
I mean, Jersey is one of the top states in the United States for football.
We don't
players.
get enough credit. I tell people, I think in my draft class, in the first round we had at least 7 first-rounders from Jersey. That were all my senior class.
Yeah, because people mentioned Florida and Texas and California is another state. Jersey's a sneaky football state.
When I was drafted, it was myself, Kyle Wilson ended up being a first-round draft pick. We had Noshawn Marino, B.J. Raji, Sean Green.
B.J. Raji Island. I remember Raji.
Brian Cushing.
Sure.
Eugene Moreau was around that time. Dwayne Jarrett, Kenny Britt, both McCourty twins. All of us were in the same high school class.
So being in Philly right now, you must have a ton of family that's coming to see you play all the time.
My
Malcolm,
family
right?
is about an hour away. Yeah, everybody's an hour.
I mean, Philly is practically a New Jersey
right across the bridge.
suburb.
Yeah.
You know, one will say that.
They wouldn't say that.
I know that. I know I'd be pissing them off.
Right.
I understand that. Malcolm Jenkins here on The Rich Eisen Show. Just a quick macro question for you before we start drilling deeper. You won with the Saints. You've won with the Eagles. What makes a Super Bowl champion in your estimation? Like, is there a formula, something a fan can think about or a player knows needs to be on a team?
I think it starts with a culture first. If you don't have a winning culture, meaning that you have from top down, from coaches to every player on the roster, everybody is bought into what you're doing in the smallest ways, and it's not, you're not having to be directed by everybody. So if there's an issue, if your locker room can handle it within the locker room without it ever having to be, a coach thing, then you've kind of established some type of culture. Secondly, you got to have the talent. But then I think the two other things that really are kind of out of your control is you got to stay healthy, and then you got to come up with a little bit of luck. And so I can remember when we played the Dolphins when I was in New Orleans. We were down, 21 points or something like that, and ended up coming back and winning that game. We played in the Redskins, and tight game. We're on the road. We're losing, and Drew Brees throws a pick, and then Robert Meacham strips the guy and then runs it for a touchdown.
I remember that, yeah.
And so, like, games like that where we probably weren't supposed to win, but we did, that kind of propel you. Even in with Philly, that it was a game we're throwing in playing the Falcons. The DB could have been an easy interception. It bounces off his knee, and then Torrey Smith catches it off the deflection. Like, things like that, tend to happen. There's a little bit of luck, but when you have the talent, you have the culture, you always give yourself a chance.
Then you also have to have those button-pushing moments, too. Both your coaches from your Super Bowl wins made some ridiculous calls on special teams, ridiculously cojones-filled calls.
Definitely.
What was it like in the locker room when Sean Payton said, we're going to go onside kick to start the second half of that Super Bowl?
So I think it's like, both coaches, I think, understood, like, who we were, right? And so we were playing the Colts, and, Manning was eating everybody up. We knew going into that game we needed to steal 2 possessions. If we can do that, we can score with them and we'd win. And so the very first one, we 2 weeks before the Super Bowl, we said, all right, we're going to put in this kick, practiced it over and over and over and over. And we go in at halftime, and he's like, hey, how do y'all feel about it? And everybody's like, let's do it. And so we come out. We get it. That was the first possession we stole, and then the second one was Tracy Porter.
Six, sure. So he took the temperature of the locker room?
Yeah, he's like, hey, how do you guys feel about it? Everybody's like, run it.
Right.
All right, let's go. Same thing, and when we played the Patriots, we knew they were going to.
The Philly special.
Yeah, we knew they were going to go, and they were going to score points. For us on defense, it got to the point where, like, we just need one stop. And then if our offense can keep, doing stuff, that Philly special, obviously, as one of the gutsiest plays in Super Bowl history, but paid off.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
You were there for both. I mean, you could say gutsiest calls in the history of the Super Bowl. We just talked about 1, 2. You could even argue which one's 1 and which one's 2.
Yeah.
In the history of that,
Yeah.
When you think about it.
Yeah. I mean, I was just, I was on the field for one and just on the sideline for the other, just kind of watching.
But the Philly special, you're on the sideline for that, right?
And I didn't know what they were going to run. So
you did not?
No, I didn't. I hadn't even seen them practice it.
Really?
Yeah. So I didn't even know where it came from.
So you were like a fan in the stadium, which was like, where the hell did that come from?
Right. I mean, it's a copycat league. The Patriots ran that play against us a couple years before we played them in the Super Bowl. Tom caught it, and then we did it again in the Super Bowl, and obviously Tom didn't catch it that time. Thank God.
Malcolm Jenkins here on the Rich Eisen Show. All right, let's do a couple quick hitters here. Instant replay now includes pass interference. You're already shaking your head.
Yeah. I mean, anything in slow motion is going to look like pass interference. And so I think, it's like any other rule change. We'll see what happens in the preseason. Usually they'll call ridiculous calls in the preseason. Fans and players will complain. And by the time we get to the regular season, they'll figure out the kinks. But I think, you look at situations like critical moments in a game where a ball goes up and then a guy on the other side of the field might be committing pass interference, but the ball's not going to him. It's on the other side. But you can challenge anybody on the field. I think that makes it makes it tough, and when you start calling things that actually have no effect on what the play was. Now, obviously, if you get a blatant call like you had in New Orleans, you want to be able to rectify that. But I think that was also, it was so blatant that that's just a bad call. And so to change all of the rules for one instance, I think makes it a little bit tougher.
Well, I mean, the head of NFL refs, Al Riveron, who's going to be here a week from tomorrow, he went to he's going around to all the networks. He stopped by the NFL media group back in June. If you recall the Thursday night football game between the Chargers and the Chiefs, where they won with no time left on a 2-point conversion, if you remember, to Mike Williams was wide open, pretty much ran the same play that they used to score a touchdown.
Yep.
That was set up by a defensive pass interference call in the end zone that if they had reviewed it, they would not have been able to change that call, but they would have, under review, caught the offensive pass interference call that was not called, would have waved it off as offsetting penalties. Do you like that as a defender, that now OPI might be raised to a certain level that hasn't been raised before?
I'm very skeptical of that. Every time they change a rule, they make it sound like they pitch it to defensive guys like, no, we'll call it for you guys too. And it never happens.
You don't believe it.
So the helmet rule that we put in last time, right?
Yes.
It's really, really strict. It's really hard on defenders to try to move and hit a moving target. But we understand the gist of the rule and what we're trying to accomplish. But it's pitched to us too, like, oh no, it can be on offensive guys too. And I might have seen it called twice, where, a running back comes through and just literally runs the guy over, with his head. That happens almost on every play, but it's rarely ever called unless it's really blatant. And so it sounds good, but we really don't get offensive pass interference called as it is. I don't know if you want coaches challenging, those type of plays, because oftentimes it's still going to be arbitrary. Are you looking at because the rule for those pick plays is it a yard down the field? If it's within a yard, then it's legal to be picked. But if it's not, and so I don't know. I think it slows down the game. I think players are smart enough to play the game we've been playing for a long time. I think the refs should just make good calls.
Malcolm Jenkins here on the Rich Eisen Show. What would you, as the NFL and NFLPA sitting down, apparently there was a chat yesterday that both sides called productive, what would you want to see in the collective bargaining agreement from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, for me, there's a ton of things. I mean, there's a lot of things that are in question that we want to learn more about. There's this new sports gambling, sports betting, all those things. There's a new stream of revenue that's out there that I think we need to be diligent about figuring out how that split is. I know a big concern for guys is just like medical care for lifetime. We put our bodies on the line, and guys are dealing with some serious medical issues once they leave the game, and to be able to have resources and not, struggle to get help. We're trying to eradicate that. I think, for me, guys talk about guaranteed contracts. I don't think in our game that it'd help if every single player had a guaranteed contract, but I think we do need to work more guarantees into the way our contracts are structured. And I think the biggest thing for me as I look at what we did last time and moving forward is just the restrictions that we have on our young playmakers in the league. So if you're, we made this rookie wage scale and thought that, okay, that money would get pushed into the middle class of the league. And in fact, it just made rookies cheaper, and all of the money really stays at the top of the league as far as players. And it makes it really, really hard on our young talent like Saquon Barkley's, your Odell Beckham's, who come into the league and within 2 years, they're the best at their position. But then they're restricted because their contracts are 4 or 5 years. So a team could essentially use you and keep you under your rookie deal for 7 years. They could use the fifth-year option, which is the average of the third highest paid player to position and the 25th. So that's a huge drop.
And then there are the franchise tags behind it.
Then they can get tagged twice after that. And so to me, it's about how do we get those players who are our market drivers, who are, the new faces of the league, to free agency faster or to, the ability, knowing that now the NFL career has shrunk even more and it's 2.6 years.
Right.
So essentially you're using players on their rookie deal, keeping them on their rookie deal through the prime of their career where they're able to make the most money. And so we want to be able to get guys out of that.
So do you think there's room for movement on something like that? Do you think, because that's a lot of math right there that you just threw out, but I understand it. I totally hear you. And, we just saw the NBA free agency. And everyone's like, well, why can't NFL free agency be like that? And I'm like, well, could you imagine if the Raptors had a franchise tag?
Yeah. Well,
Kawhi would have gone nowhere.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So, that's for starters, A.
Right.
You can't, that's for absolute starters. So is franchise tags, in your estimation, that should be on the table? Because I know that affects a very top 1%, but you've just described how it does create a domino effect.
Certain tags are fine. Is more so for these rookies who are, like I said, your deal, if you're playing well, is going to get extended to 5 years. Then they can tag you twice after that. And so you don't get to free agency until your 8th year. Possibly, potentially, if a team didn't want to, secure you long term. And so I think that's one of the things. And then when it comes to guaranteed money, I think one of the things that that we don't necessarily understand or talk about enough is that the NBA and all these other leagues, they don't have mandatory contracts in their CBAs. So it's not mandatory, the guaranteed contracts. And so for us, I think we as players, where we kind of do ourselves a disservice is we're able to collude. So if I'm a free agency, I'm a free agent, and I know another guy's a free agent, another guy, we can all call each other and say, look, we're not going to sign anything unless it's guaranteed. The owners cannot do that. They collude, it's a violation of the CBA. But unfortunately, we don't exercise that power, I think, enough to just mandate it and start those trends. But I think it's well within our rights to, one, change how our contracts are structured in the CBA, but also as players kind of exercise the leverage that we have right now.
Why don't you, if you don't mind, sign the Ohio State helmet that will be here forevermore. That's always here on the set.
Yeah.
Well, at the very same time, so you pointed out across the way the bust that has been here that was created along with our set. That's me. You thought that was Bo Schembechler?
I just figured it was Bo Schembechler.
Right, because you saw a Michigan hat on top of it.
Well, I was setting up a joke to say he started at Ohio State, but that's neither here or there.
Let's not be very cavalier with facts. He started at Miami of Ohio,
yeah.
where he coached with Woody Hayes there.
There you go.
So he's a Woody Hayes disciple.
You're right.
But it's okay.
He wasn't at Ohio State at all?
Never.
You sure?
Miami of Ohio.
Okay.
And I said that is actually my old hat from college that I had Jim Harbaugh sign when he stopped by here. And you said, what did you say? And
then I asked, first I said Michigan people are weird.
That's what you said.
And then I said, is like the college hat a thing?
No, it's not. It's just like I had it in college. I've always kept it. And I figured, why not just take it out of service and have the coach who was my quarterback freshman year,
I'm going to poll for everybody in the studio right now. Is anybody have a hat in their possession that they had in college?
No. Okay. So do you want to talk about weird, though?
That would be the equivalent of me having a sweater vest because I played for Jim Tressel, and I was like, this is my college sweater vest that I will always keep.
But the weird thing is you would call it the sweater vest.
I would definitely call it.
Sweater.
It's the.
What's with the? You want to talk about weird? It's the. It's not like we confuse it with another Ohio State university.
Well, first off, it's in the actual name of the school. So it's not like we're making it up.
Right.
It's literally the Ohio State University.
Right.
The Malcolm Jenkins Foundation.
Oh, is that why there's a "the" for your foundation?
That's why there's a "the" there.
Oh, come on.
He didn't even know.
It's because I was about to. A number of times I was just going to go to MalcolmJenkinsFoundation.org, but it's the. Oh my gosh. If it wasn't doing good for so many people, I would have to make fun of that. But no, you've got to keep doing good community works through the MalcolmJenkinsFoundation.org. The quarterback of the Philadelphia Eagles, Carson Wentz, how's he doing?
He's doing good.
He's good.
Had a good spring. I think he's confident. He's throwing the ball well.
Okay.
I think he's recovered and everything, so he's ready to go.
Where did all those unnamed quotes from that piece that was run couple of years ago come from that he's not popular within the locker room?
No, I think that was a vigilante, reporter trying to get some likes. I think, it's one of those things when we had a weird situation where you have a Carson Wentz and a Nick Foles in the same locker room.
Yep.
And so, of course, the questions that come is who do you prefer? Who do you like more? And I think they do have two different personalities, but, Carson as a teammate is a great guy. He comes in, he's somebody he's a quarterback who doesn't try to act like he's the leader or the quarterback or be vocal just because he plays that position. He's had the opportunity to come in as a young guy and grow into a little bit of a leadership piece. He's a guy who likes the outdoors. He doesn't necessarily like the city life. So he's not one that's going to be partying with guys, but, he's a great teammate. He's there for you. So a lot of the stuff was overblown.
Yeah, he went to the North Dakota State University. If I'm not
Yeah, I
mistaken.
don't know if they would qualify for but
okay,
yeah,
all right.
he went to North Dakota.
So, because those sorts of things where there's multiple quarterbacks who are successful in a locker room can create factions. Who was policing that, or did it require any policing? I guess
I don't think it required any.
How does that
policing.
happen?
Because whenever Nick was in there, Carson wasn't available. So it's not like we had both of them and they're competing for a job in camp, and you got half the team that's saying, hey, we want him to be the starter, and half the team, we went into the season, in both seasons, really knowing Carson is our quarterback. And then Carson gets injured, and we feel really good about Nick being our quarterback, from there on out. And so that's a great problem to have. We try not to let, outside voices, penetrate our locker rooms. A pretty tight group. And I think we've handled that, pretty well as best we can as a team.
So the goal is what?
Win.
Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it's difficult for a player to just come out and put that on the table.
No, I mean the goal. If your goal is not to win the Super Bowl,
well, then I guess what needs to happen for you to win the Super Bowl this year?
Well, I'm never one to think that you just show up and win. And so for us, I think on paper right now, this preseason potential that we have, things look great. But that changes, you don't know what you have until you step out of training camp. And so for us, we got a pretty tough schedule. And I think as long as we can stay healthy, I think we can play with anybody in the league. It's just about really winning the games that you're supposed to win. Find a way to get a couple that you aren't.
Yep.
And then just put yourself in position in a division first that guarantees your spot into the tournament. And then, from there, you're working on positioning. But if we focus on our division just to get into the tournament, I feel like we'll be in a good spot later down the road.
Got 3 minutes left. Brockman, read the quote from Jim Harbaugh today that was uttered by the coach of the University of Michigan. Go for it, Chris.
So Tim Kawakami did a podcast with Jim Harbaugh, asked him about Urban Meyer. Urban's had a winning record, a really phenomenal record everywhere he's been, but also controversy follows everywhere he's been.
Your thoughts, Malcolm?
Yeah, winners attract attention. He hasn't had a controversy besides his dress code or something. Harbaugh?
Are you talking to me?
No, this is just, I don't know. I'll just put it out on the music. I mean, when you're winning, you get attention, you get cameras, people want to,
I think Malcolm's implying that Jim Harbaugh isn't winning.
Yeah, basically, that's what he didn't hear that. I was implying that Jim Harbaugh isn't winning. So there's no controversy.
I heard that.
Besides his job security.
I'm sorry, is my guest talking right now?
Great quote, I guess.
I'm close. I'm here. And before I let you go, the MalcolmJenkinsFoundation.org is how you can get involved with everything that you are doing. But real quick, you and Chris Long helped a law come into be, the Clean Slate Act. What is that?
Yeah, so I don't even know, 2 years ago maybe, myself, Torrey Smith, and Chris Long took a trip down to Harrisburg, PA to lobby for a piece of legislation called the Clean Slate Act. And what that does is, once we found out that 1 in 3 people have some type of criminal record, and all of the effects of that means that you sometimes get discriminated against for housing, for education, for business loans, all type of things. It's hard to get a job. And so you got 1/3 of the population that's dealing with those type of restrictions for small, things. And so this piece of legislation basically, after 10 years, automatically cleans up or wipes away or seals someone's record for nonviolent misdemeanors. So they don't have to petition for it. They don't have to do anything. As long as they don't violate for a 10-year period, it's just off of their record. And it gets people, it's not a fix-all, but it gets people, back to being productive citizens, to be able to get kind of this scarlet letter off of their life for things they've done, the small things that they've done maybe in their youth.
Do you want to get into politics when you're done?
No, not really. I like to put pressure on elected officials. I don't necessarily want to be one.
Okay. Malcolm Jenkins, I really appreciate you coming by here, sir. As you know, I root for you with the exception of one Saturday in November every single year.
And I appreciate it.
I know you appreciate that.
I give you a hard time a lot. And you keep it pretty professional. It's impressive.
Well, you could upgrade the a lot to all the time. By the way, you're kind of downplaying the amount of grief that I get, but at some point it turns.
I'm waiting for it to turn. The rivalry. The rivalry is. I just want y'all to make it close.
Oh, stop! That is the worst, most backhanded insult you could possibly give, which is why you just delivered it.
The rivalry is dying.
It is not dying.
It used to be one of the greatest in sports.
Oh gosh.
But when you won for like almost a decade and a half now.
All right, Malcolm, it's now time for you to go.
For more of the Rich Eisen Show, tune to Audience Channel 239 on DirecTV for free on BR Live or download the Rich Eisen Show app.